So jumping ahead quite a bit, I've gone ahead and rendered the layout in Enscape. I've added topography and some other features here. The topography was added in Revit. The trees are, because it's Enscape, are placed in Revit and then appear at high detail inside Enscape. You don't have to use Enscape. You don't really even have to embellish your visual this far along. I've noticed in recent years that a lot of students like to use Lumion and Enscape and maybe even Twinmotion. So this is a chance. I think this is something that really lends itself to that kind of embellishment, especially placing the people in the scene to give a sense of scale to the structures that we've created. So I've included in my output, as you can see, this is a PDF, which would be what your deliverable would be. I've got the ground level elevation. I went ahead and made a kind of a bird's eye view elevation, maybe to be more descriptive. And then I've imported the dynamo definition, and you'll notice that I've kind of really changed this. I've grouped things, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, and then labeled those in a way that will help you actually in the future, if you wanted to use this tool again, to understand what kind of coding you wrote. And then the final thing that I think is very important is this idea of demonstrating that you can actually dimension these ribs as individual elements for fabricating. And I don't, you could dimension all of them. They're dynamically updated. Obviously, if you change any aspect of the bow or width, these will automatically update. I'd love it if you play with that a little bit to just see how that dynamically updates. I've kind of demonstrated that before in some of these videos. And I would want you on this sheet at least to have one set of dimensioned ribs. And this is a level 1 that I've renamed to the fabrication layout, and I've changed its scale a little bit to fit this kind of a technical drawing sheet. I've also rendered them in realistic just so they would read a little better on the sheet. So that's the idea, the basic deliverables, those 4 sheets. Let's jump back into Dynamo and I'll show you how I actually made the groupings. So actually what I'll do here is I'll just ungroup something. I'll right click on this and ungroup it, and that'll just disappear. Actually, I forgot what I labeled it. Ground plane points to hold ribs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ungroup this. And then I'm just going to make a box around it. And once those are all selected, just right-clicking on it. And you can go create a group. In this case, it's green. If I right-click again, I can change this to any color I want. And then double-click here to edit the group. So I'll say create for fabrication layout. All right. And so I've labeled one is inputs, the one where we actually do the shape lines and mirroring. Like I said, to create the array for the layout, the translation to the flat plane for dimensioning, or the layout plane. Let me just edit that back to layout plane. And then finally connect to the adaptive components in Revit, which is where we use that adaptive components by point function. So now that's all kind of labeled, and so coming back, a year later, you could actually recognize the kind of the technique of coding that you worked through with that. And remember, these dynamic, we can change these at any time. All of these value systems, the number of ribs, whatever we want to do, we can dynamically change. And the only unfortunate thing is with Enscape, since Enscape isn't live connected to visualizing right inside of our Revit sheet, we'd have to re-render the Enscape images if we changed any characteristics of it. But we could, for a client, be running this dynamically and just changing the number of ribs and having a discussion about how that affected the overall look of the kind of sculptural design we were doing. So that covers the aspects of the grouping this dynamo definition. And then I'll remind you there's the export as image, and you can export that as a workspace, and it'll come out as I believe it is a PNG file, of which you can then go ahead and place into the Revit document. Now on the other end of it, just a little bit of information about how we got here. So this is a floor plan layout. This is a layout sheet that wasn't originally the floor plan. I just renamed it to fabrication layout. I hid all of the other existing components that were in that first floor level, the full structure, the Enscape trees, and the topography. Let's see if we go to the site, though, I can discuss. So here it is with everything all together, unstripped out. I guess maybe I'd want to touch on this idea of creating topography. I found this to be really quite effective for this, just the ability to build landscape. Let's go back just for a second to the to this view, and let me get it to fit on the page here. And you'll notice how I've created a bit of a mound here. The change in elevation, I think, is 2 feet from where the trees are planted to the top where our sculpture is. But you can see how that really is quite effective in creating a sense of a podium, at least, or a platform for our sculpture, but at the same time giving some more realism to the setup, not just a flat, completely level grass plane. And then I used a countryside background in Enscape, and that just seemed to work really seamlessly with this idea of mounding. It looks like this path is on a hill, and it could be anywhere, even in Alfred, New York, overlooking the hilly terrain around the area. So, and that was done in just the topography adjustments. I hope you're familiar with them, but if you're not, it's really quite easy to create a topo. Let me get on the right screen. Massing in site. And if I was to click on this, you can see I've created a flat region, a sub-region that I've given a different texture to. The topography surface has 4 points at, I think they're -2. If I go to edit surface, it'll probably tell me what they are. If I click on that point, I don't want to add a point. Let me just see if it'll report what it is. It's elevation of -2. And if I went inside, it created points as I was mounding it up to what would be like the 0 point of the elevation. For those of you who haven't used Enscape, you can see that there are trees placed in the Revit document, and they're really quite crude looking, but they are listed as Enscape asset definitions. And what really makes that nice is that you can precisely move these elements, seeing them inside of Revit, and then having them dynamically update inside of the Enscape document. So that, I think, is a pretty good overview, if I have to say so for myself, of what I think the deliverables should be. Like I said, these don't have to be Enscape or Lumion renderings. They can be straight out of Revit. That's fine. I do want to see you go through it and work through the re-review and group the elements of the definition, and then include a technical layout of each one of those ribs. Now, there's a lot of other things. There's some things that are wrong with the design of this. You may have been frustrated with the creation of the ribs and the adaptive components. I know I have a lot of aggravation with that. And so I may add some additional videos for those of you who want to explore deeper. One of them is actually to create a Dynamo player so that we could just not have to start Dynamo at all and run Dynamo as a player mode directly inside of Revit. And I'll possibly do that as the next video. But if not, this is the deliverable that if you do a good job, you'll get full credit for this project.